I think a really effective partnership between a philanthropist or a foundation and a non-profit partner is trust. And part of that trust is really understanding how the model works, what's getting in the way, how can the funder intervene and help relieve that barrier.
Welcome to The Giving Habit, the podcast that unlocks the grit, hope and creativity of social impact. I'm delighted to be joined here today by Lisa Cotton, CEO of Ideology Group. Lisa is also chair of the Kennards Hire Foundation, a member of AirTrunk's Social Impact Committee. One of Australia's most experienced leaders when it comes to the intersection of philanthropy, of commercial discipline and of governance. Welcome to The Giving Habit, Lisa.
Thanks very much, Stephen.
I'd like to start by focusing on your work with Kennards Hire Foundation. I understand the foundation was formed in 2018. You joined as chair in 2022.
Yeah.
I'm super interested in the origins of the foundation overall. What was going on within the business, within the family at the time that made it feel necessary to shift from kind of broad generosity to more structured and intentional giving?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. The Kennards family have given for a very long time, for decades. They've always been very generous, but they realised that if they're more intentional about their giving, they can be more effective as philanthropists. So around that time was 2018, and Kirsty Kennard, who's the daughter of Andy and Prue Kennard, worked with mum and dad to actually set up the foundation, a private ancillary fund, so they could be more intentional. And at the same time, the business was evolving because the business was very much involved in the community as well and had done a lot of work in the community. So Kirsty united those two. And as a result, the philanthropy became very strategic in terms of being able to identify the real needs of the non-profit partners. And importantly, being able to offer more than just funding, to be able to offer them capacity building in terms of learning opportunities, introductions to networks, not surprisingly discounted equipment from Kennards if they need those.
Yeah.
So together that blend was very, very powerful. And in fact, it's the point of difference with the Kennards Hire Foundation and most philanthropic foundations.
Yeah, it seems to me that when I looked at the work, it is well beyond just pure play funding.
Yeah.
There is, as you say, there's access to in-kind support. So it is equipment, so it's leveraging the capabilities of Kennards Hire as an organisation, but also, if I understand, staff engagement as well, right? So you've got volunteering programs that take place and staff are encouraged to contribute and participate. What, in your view, carries the most value, or what makes the most difference? Is it the funding? Is it the in-kind support? What's the most effective tool in that kit bag?
That's such an interesting question because one would assume it's the funding. I think they're equal measure in terms of the importance, because the funding is critical and long-term funding is critical, but the capacity building is often something that, or capability building, both, and there's a difference with the two. Capability building is often an opportunity that a lot of non-profits can't afford. They can't afford to do professional development. They don't necessarily have the networks to be able to get pro bono support. So that can be the catalyst for growth. It can be the catalyst to come up with a brilliant idea to be more efficient with systems and processes internally, etc. So I would balance the two and say they're equally important.
You talked a little bit about kind of capability building, and that's hard for some funders to get their head around, quite frankly, right? There's, operational expenditure. It's almost deemed to be, well, that's you're supposed to take care of that. They're only interested in funding service delivery outcomes because I suppose it's more measurable, it's more immediate, it's more obvious what the benefit and the outcome is. So how do you measure capacity and capability building in the work that you do through the foundation?
That's a really interesting conversation. Look, I think a really effective partnership between a philanthropist or a foundation and a non-profit partner is trust. And part of that trust is really understanding how the model works, what's getting in the way, how can the funder intervene and help relieve that barrier. So maybe what's getting in the way is they're lacking accounting systems, for instance. So can the funder pay for a software maybe what's getting in the way is that the CEO just doesn't have the time to lift their head out of the business and the day-to-day to really think about the future and what's their long-term aim and what's the pathway to get there. So the funder might support them with a mentor. So it's really important, I think, in terms of measuring. That's a very hard thing to measure, but I think the measurement would come out in the partner satisfaction and levels of confidence, the ability, a clear ability for them to be able to see the wood from the trees and grow. So it's anecdotal, it's not necessarily tangible, but I think you see the measures coming out in the quality of the relationship and the success of the non-profit organisation.
Thinking about the foundation itself, so the types of volunteering, it's not the kind of traditional hands-on kind of manual volunteering at the front line. It's actually mentoring and support taking place at different levels of the organisation, finance, leadership, different forms of general management. Is that right?
Generally speaking, yes, across philanthropy. With Kennards, I think a good example is a program called Traction Connect. It's a Pathways to Employment program that we have co-designed. And when I say we, the foundation, the business, Kennards Business, and Traction itself, which is a youth non-profit organisation out of Brisbane. And that was very much led by the Kennards Business, saying this is an opportunity for us to really roll our sleeves up, use our skills and our business assets to help these young people transition into employment. So what that looked like, and it's a terrific program, Traction is about equipping skills, kids with work skills, and they do that through building bikes. And whilst they're building bikes, they're provided mentoring, they're provided education, opportunities for work experience, and the work experience is tailored to their particular characteristics and needs. And that work experience, the kids go into the Kennards branches and they are mentored, they're given safety instruction.
Fantastic.
They are told how to tell stories, and they are just immersed into the business. So it was only launched 2024.
Okay.
20 young people have gone through the program. 5 have written resumes and they've been helped by the Kennards team to do that. And 2 have been hired by Kennards. So that's such a success story, and it's actually a really good, great outcome in terms of the hiring. And one of those people, a gorgeous young woman called Holly, is the casual branch hand at the branch in Brisbane. And Holly is being mentored by a female mentor. The branch are putting supports around the business to help Holly. And she has just grown enormously in confidence, and the branch love her. She's added a really lovely dimension to the branch, how they interact. So it's a great success story.
And it strikes me there's a win all round, right? There's from a Kennards Hire business perspective, there is value out of this. So I use the phrase enlightened self-interest. Right? Yes, there is a self-interest at play, and that's okay. It is enlightened. It is creating value for different stakeholders and different communities, and presumably that plays out in terms of employee attraction, making hiring easy, as you say, tapping into new sources of talent in the example you just gave. But also then engagement, productivity, staff retention, and so on. Is that something that is actively measured through the work that the foundation does?
A process and a framework is being developed to measure that. But the feedback that we're getting is that the Kennards Hire staff love this. What's worked at Traction and why it's been such a good fit with that non-profit partner of ours is that the staff members who've worked on the program have shared some of their own challenges as young people with the young kids, and that's when this sense of connection happens between the mentor and the mentee, and that's when things really started to lift and made the Kennards staff just feel so privileged and satisfied that they're part of something bigger than themselves. And at the end of the day, this whole program's about our common humanity, and I think that's the special sauce with this particular program. There's a sense of connectedness and glue that, because it's designed in the right way with the right intentions, It's very powerful.
Very good. Yeah, that self-awareness, that sense of privilege that comes from it, wanting to be able to pay it forward, that sense of connectedness. I mean, that's all going to speak to engagement and retention and attraction. That makes it a really powerful part of the Kennards brand,
yes.
right? Doing it in the right way.
Yeah.
I've also noticed, I was looking at the work that the foundation does, that there seems to be relatively few grantee partners, relatively few charities with whom the foundation works. That feels like a very conscious act to, rather than go kind of wide and run the risk of spreading yourself too thin, you prefer to develop very deep relationships with your grantee partners. So I suppose the question is, what does that degree of patience make possible in terms of those long-term relationships?
Oh, I think patience is key. And the reason it's key, it's like any relationship. It takes a long time to get to know your partner. Mm-hmm. And long-term funding enables long-term partnerships, not just funding, long-term partnerships enable our nonprofit partners to be able to plan with certainty, to be able to, we together can learn and grow through the experience and understand what works and what doesn't work. I mean, there is a place for short-term funding. There's absolutely nothing wrong with short-term funding, like bushfires or floods or food insecurity. But to a degree, it's a Band-Aid measure, and it won't shift a system to get people who are stuck in disadvantage. And long-term funding, it's a long-term game. We're talking about changing behaviours, and it's deeply complex. So unless you're prepared to go deep into these relationships and work to identify how a foundation can best support them beyond money, it makes it difficult to have a really deep impact.
Yeah, it's a difference between servicing an issue and as you say, making a long-term impact.
Yeah.
But that means you need to have the patience and a willingness to take on really complex topics in the way that you've described. If you want to shift systems, you have to develop a deeper understanding of what's really going on and be prepared to put yourself in service to that. Right, and I think we always go into these preconceived ideas about how we're going to engage, and yet you learn, you start to connect, you start to relate to the charities. Actually, our original theory of change is wrong. We actually have to fundamentally shift our thinking and invest in different ways. So presumably, that longer term partnership gives you that space to learn and develop and evolve the models of intervention, if you will.
That's right. And you don't impose your views on the non-profit partner. They're the experts in what they do. They often have lived experience of the issues that they're addressing. And the issues are invariably interconnected across a whole lot of domains. So there is great complexity, and I think that it's important for funders to be humble about their contribution beyond money and how else they can help.
Yeah, to avoid those unintended consequences, I think, of engagement. Now obviously your role is as chair of the foundation, and I suppose as chair, what are the things that you look for in terms of whether things are going well or not? Presumably, I can't imagine, do you get involved much in the operational day-to-day work, or do you hold very much at that kind of board governance level?
Very much at the board governance level, but I do have strong oversight of the operational level as well. I don't get involved in it, but I'm consulted a lot.
Okay, and that's important for you in the role of chair?
Well, it is important because we're still a relatively small foundation. And given that I've got sort of 20 plus years experience in the field, I'm not surprised that I'm consulted quite a bit. So
of course.
I enjoy it,
If you've got those skills, and I think that's an interesting call out. I think any board member, any trustee of any charitable organisation needs to bring something more than just their presence on the board. One can be a non-executive director and have all those skills to, mitigate risk and ensure, governance and organisational health, but actually some degree of operational experience is useful, right? So you can tap into those skills.
Very.
Fundraising's almost like a minimum expectation sometimes, if nothing else then fundraise, but otherwise, and is that something you look for? Do you, as chair, and you're looking at the health of the board overall, are you looking at the contributions that each trustee or board member is making and challenging them on that, or developing those skill sets?
Yeah, we have really robust discussions on the board, and the board, it's a terrific board, and Andy Kennard's on the board, so someone who's been able to build a massive family-owned business brings all of those skills on the board. Prue is on the board, Andy's wife, and she's terrific. She has a deep passion for community, and her contributions are great. So the board members, and then we have some representatives from the business, or a representative from the business and the Family Foundation. So they again bring different perspective. We do have really robust discussions and a deep yearning to understand exactly what the impact is of the organisations that we support.
Very, very good. So, okay, we've spoken a little bit about Kennards Hire Foundation and some of the work that you're doing there. Take a step back, because you've got a lot more experience beyond Kennards Hire Foundation in the for-purpose space. Maybe a starting point, though. Talk about origins. When you first stepped into the social impact sector. One of the hopes and aspirations that we have for the Giving Habit as a podcast is that we grow the giving pie in Australia. And that can happen through encouraging more organisations to consider setting up foundations, or more people looking to participate and engage in the social impact space. You kind of shine a light on the different pathways and the different motivations that cause people to come into the sector in the first place. It might help just uncover, people might start to recognise themselves in those journeys. So tell us about your first steps into the for-purpose space. What were your motivations? What was shaping your thinking at the time?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question, because some people join the for-purpose space because they've had a particular experience.
Yep.
But for me, my early career, I held executive roles in government and corporations in tourism, trade and communications. And I was really enjoying that. And I think very successful, but I was incredibly restless. I came over to Sydney from the Perth Mint to work on the Sydney Olympics with a major licensing program.
Very good.
And when the Olympics finished, I decided I'd stay in Sydney. But after a while, I really did feel quite restless. And by chance, I happened to see a story on Channel 9 about this average Australian family living out of their car and eating from a van at Hyde Park. And it really struck me. And I couldn't stop thinking about it. And it was happening while I was feeling restless. So I went to the van and I met with the couple that ran this non-profit organisation, and I ended up by volunteering there at the van. And then I ended up by getting more involved and setting up a committee and trying to get some structure around the foundation itself. And what struck me at the time is it was really transformative. Working with people who understand how to change people's lives and lift them out of poverty was really enlightening. And more importantly, it just gives you this sense of connectedness to the world. And I think that sense of connectedness to the world, that it opens up another dimension beyond just being successful in business, is what did it for me.
Wow.
So after that, I came across Social Ventures Australia, which had really only been going for about a year and a half, and I started mentoring as part of their mentoring program. Then I joined them as Director of Social Investment, and I held that role for 7 years. And I work closely with SVAs, high net worth individual funders and corporates, and our portfolio of non-profit partners and social enterprises. So I learned an enormous amount about philanthropic practices and social issues really broadly across society. But one thing that struck me with philanthropy is that there's a big gap for everyday Australians to give meaningfully, and that led me to co-founding the Funding Network, and that was back in 2013. And the Funding Network is a live crowdfunding model for grassroots non-profit organisations, smaller non-profit organisations who often don't have networks, they don't have access to funding. It was uniting them with everyday Australians who want to give, but they just don't know how to give meaningfully and where to find these organisations. So TFN brings them together in typically a large corporate setting. The audience is typically 100, 150 people. There are 3 charities that pitch for funding.
Okay,
and
it's like Dragon's Den.
It's like a Dragon's Den, but it's not It's nicer.
Yeah,
it's kinder.
You would hope so.
So they pitch for 6 minutes. The audience asks questions for 6 minutes. Then it's live pledging. And the key to this is it's pledging from $100.
Okay.
So it's about the collective. It's about giving meaningfully. It's about participatory giving. So the whole room gets acknowledged. They laugh. They cry. It's very, very powerful. And at the end of the day, the projects come back and they're advised how much they got in front of the audience. And it's typically anything from $30,000 to $70,000 each for a 6-minute pitch. So to date,
it's huge for a small startup charity. That's a very significant amount of money.
And they're exposed to a new network of donors, and they get additional support beyond funding with that too.
And that's still running today?
Yeah, it's still running today. It's supported about 600 non-profit organisations, I think facilitated about $32 million. So it's the largest collective giving model in Australia, and there's a place for it in the ecosystem.
Yes. Yeah,
which
very
is
clearly.
great.
I love that kind of grassroots engagement. So, one of the things we explore is that there is a transition period, I think, particularly for people navigating midlife when they're looking to move from success to significance. And you've described 2 very clear pathways for that. For those that are just thinking, step back, the question that often happens is people are interested in moving from success to significance, but the question is, I just don't know how to get started. I don't know what the first step looks like. You just described 2 ways of doing that. One is the funding model. Get involved in the funding network, right? Turn up to one of those events and learn more about different charitable organisations, and that creates an opportunity to give through funding. But you also showed another pathway, which was the curiosity piece. You heard a story, it resonated, and you decided to act on that. I can't imagine you knew what you were letting yourself in for when you started that conversation. But there was intention behind it. There was curiosity behind it. And you chose to ask a question, find out more. So one of the things I find around this sector is there's no barriers there. If you're expressing an interest and you're genuinely curious, people welcome you in. They can frankly use the help. But they're willing to have a conversation. They're willing to explain what they're doing, why they're doing, and that can lead on to really fruitful conversations and new ways of working, which is what you discovered there. Yeah. That must have unlocked all sorts of different opportunities off the back of that, from the sounds of things. And so now you have more of a sector-wide lens in terms of the work that you're doing. If looking for the kind of profile, there's board roles, there's advisory positions, there's capability, building through the work, obviously with Kennards Hire Foundation, lots of different levels of engagement. What are some of the strengths that you see in the philanthropic sector in Australia in particular, and where might the sector still feel a little bit stuck?
Look, the strengths of the sector is there are some brilliant sector leaders, and they, I think with social media, their profiles are getting higher now, which is important. But the strengths are this courage to address their convictions and play out their convictions in terms of the way they walk in this world, what they believe in, a sense of social justice, ability to articulate that in a way that can bring people along. And it's all about people. It's people that drive them. It's not the dollar that drives them. It's the changing lives that drives them. And there is this great growing thirst for learning. So there are new practices. There are coalitions of non-profits getting together to address a particular issue. The sector is incredibly resilient, despite it being tough. Yeah. Despite them addressing a myriad of issues, despite limited funding. And they can be very tenacious and resourceful. I would love to see a sector leader being put in a corporation, being given a challenge, and then delivering on that challenge, because they know how to work with limited budgets. They're innovative, tenacious, and adaptable. And I think it's the adaptability to address an issue, provide an intervention. If it's not working, pivot, build on that, build on the learning, get the evidence, and we see a lot of that, and there's some brilliant operators doing that.
So clear strengths. Where might there be kind of sticking points at the moment? Are there kind of repeat things that are coming up time and again that you see that you intervene, you try to help with?
Repeat things. Look, one of my bugbears with the sector, and it doesn't do itself a service, is saying that we have low admin costs, because that does the sector and that non-profit organisation such a disservice. You know, we've got to pay for organisational strength as you know, the philanthropic sector. And saying that, you know, we only have 15% of overheads feeds into this terrible narrative that we don't want to cover overheads, we just fund programs. And Australia will never lift itself out of some of the intractable social issues unless we actually start investing in non-profit organisations accountably, as we would invest in a business. That's the only way we're going to be able to scale and grow some of these solutions.
It's interesting. I would have taken that topic and have assumed that it was a funder problem, that it was to do with, okay, and the funders, they want to see the service delivered, they want the outcomes, they want the impact report, they want the lovely photographs in their annual report, you know, to talk about their kind of responsibility, corporate social responsibility, and how good they are. And, you know, maybe I'm painting it too simplistically, but you've actually explained it's the founder mentality as well, that when we tell stories in a certain way about how we're people focused and it's not about the overhead and we have low admin costs, we're the ones that perhaps guilty of setting the expectation. Wow, I hadn't thought about it in
and
those
that's
terms.
happened for centuries. You know, because there's a fantastic film called Uncharitable, and this talks about we need to think about charity in a different way. Even the word charity infers sort of hand to mouth, as opposed to a non-profit organisation or a for-purpose organisation or a social enterprise, which is for-profit but for purpose. So they put the money back in to address the particular social issues. So yes, it's deeply ingrained systematically to do that. So there's fault on both sides. From the funders' perspective, yes, funders often just want to fund programs, not operational costs, but they're missing out on the impact unless they fund capacity building as well. You know, funding programs results in lots of activities. Funding capability and capacity results in impact. And that's really best practice philanthropy.
It's hard to sell. You know, do you know what I mean? In terms of, so when I go to, I run a charity, and I'll go talk to a grant-making organisation, or talk to one of our existing funders, and also we need to do some capacity building work. We need to strengthen core systems. We need to hire some folk to do things. That broader, longer-term capacity building doesn't sell so easy, right? It takes a certain type of conversation, a certain type of funder, and a certain type of conversation to do that. How do you think we can how do we shift the narrative? What are the things that we can do? I mean, one of them, interestingly, I think, is in the language that we've begun to use even in this conversation. Rather than saying not-for-profit, which defines us by what we are not, we're saying that we are for purpose. That's shifting the narrative, even just in a change of choice of words. What are some of the other things that we can do to shift that conversation towards the risks, the operational expenditure, the capacity building that we're talking about here?
There's a great piece of research that's been done called Pay What It Takes, and I would encourage anyone who's involved in philanthropy to look that up. It really is about what does it take to change the system so it can be more effective and change more lives. And part of that is actually looking at a for-purpose organisation and saying, right, how would you scale and grow this organisation if it was funded properly? If you pay the staff properly, you know, you will attract the best leaders. If they have a marketing budget, their brand will grow, therefore they'll get more volunteers, etc. So it addresses all of these things. And that's, I think, sorry, to answer your question, I think that non-profit leaders have to be braver and have more courage in having these very real conversations about how they grow and scale their organisations. And when they do that, and it's evidence-based, they've got a theory of change that they're pursuing. They've got a strategic plan to help them achieve those outcomes. And that strategic plan costs out what it costs to deliver those outcomes. So if they share that with the funder has a much more rational base to make those decisions and share that with the board or the decision makers about the funding.
Also about attracting the right talent and skills into the industry in the first place to make it possible, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, look, the industry has some brilliant people and a lot of corporate refugees in the industry, in the sector. But at the end of the day, people join it because of purpose, not because of money. That's not an excuse, though. You still, particularly in today's economic climate, you still have to pay people appropriately. And, you know, there are many salaries that just haven't moved with the times.
No.
A lot, most, in fact.
Corporate refugees, that's a very good way of putting it. I identify.
I always want those.
Yeah. But it also creates interesting, so I do some volunteering with an organisation up in Singapore, and there's this very clear gap, this interest. We've got early in career, people coming out of university, super passionate, want to work in that space. They'll be there with us 3, 5, 8 years, great. But then there's almost like a feeling like, I have to go and now, I need to provide for my family, so I'll step out, I'll earn, and then maybe later in life they'll come back into that, as you say, as a corporate refugee or otherwise. And so you don't get that continuity is lost, the continuity of the build-up of skills and experiences and capability that comes with 5, 10, 20, 30 years in the sector. We seem to be missing out on that. And that's a risk for the industry as a whole if we don't retain and build and develop those skills in the for-purpose sector over an extended period of time.
There's a school of thought, your example, that university, you do some volunteering and then you actually have to start building some capital and develop your career. And some of the people, some people think, well, I'll be successful in business and then I can give back. I'll have the capital to be able to do that, and then I can volunteer. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that.
It's legitimate. Right?
But it does get back to, I think the underlying issue is we've got to pay our sector leaders more. We've got to enable them to be able to enact the really powerful interventions that they have, and to stop these issues from going around in circles and never being resolved.
There was an aspect to this. There was a question I was going to ask, which was, the question was literally, if you could strengthen one capability across the for-purpose sector, what would it be? And I figured we might find ourselves talking about leadership or finance or storytelling, but actually we're circling around the subject of storytelling a little bit here. And it is a core skill, whether the storytelling is around the importance of operational expenditure or storytelling about the work that we're doing. And I see that you've written and spoken about storytelling in the past as well. So perhaps we'll kind of presuppose the answer to be storytelling, and we'll dig into that. It might seem obvious, but good storytelling creates emotional connection. It can unlock participation and engagement. It can unlock funding. It can also be a huge impediment if it's done badly, right? You find yourself doing a disservice to your organisation, to the beneficiaries you serve, and so on. What advice would you have for people, in terms of improving their storytelling capability? What's some of the pitfalls that you're seeing? What's some of the opportunities to improve storytelling across the sector?
Yeah, I mean, look, storytelling is the lifeblood of the sector. And some people might see it as a soft skill. It is the single most powerful tool you can have to increase your sustainability, attract funders, attract volunteers, appeal to stakeholders. And you're so reliant on a whole number of stakeholders. One of the things that goes wrong in storytelling is what I would say is the curse of knowledge.
Okay.
You have so much knowledge about a particular issue or intervention, which is deeply complex, and you try and articulate all that to a funder, and they completely shut down. Or you try and articulate it in an annual report or in any communication medium, and people's eyes glaze over. So it's always bringing that back to human stories that are relatable. And the other fault of the sector is sector jargon. We're so deeply immersed in the sector that you forget that your everyday Australians don't understand what the sector's about. Introducing jargon is just not going to help. That the sector has to convey deeply complex systemic issues that are really abstract in many ways. So storytelling helps to bring those abstract ideas and models to life. You know, it's a way to communicate our beliefs, our programs, and when it's done badly, our programs are never going to get off the ground. Storytelling is a constant, it's a practice. It's a practice like learning music. It's a practice like anything else that has to be rehearsed, refined, and built upon over time. But it really is if you do it well, it's really the quickest way to amplify impact. And there's a lot of storytelling courses out there, programs that can be done to be a more effective storyteller. But one of the things that frustrates me a lot in storytelling or communications is when you go on and you're looking for a non-profit organisation, you want to understand more about them, you go onto their website, their homepage doesn't describe who they are and what they do. Actually what they do. They might have their values, etc. But so then you've got to delve through navigate the whole site to try and have
the who are we, what do I say?
Exactly, programs, a succinct description of who you are. It is really, really frustrating.
I may need to go onto my... So I run a charity that focuses on education in rural communities in Sri Lanka. You've given me a good... I might just go back and look at the website just to make sure that we're doing that.
Just do it on the front homepage. So at a glance, and that then will pique interest to go further into the... Anyway, that's just a bit of a bugbear of mine.
Of course. But it takes to your point, it's a skill that can be acquired and can be developed. I think too often folks in this space rely on their passion. A lot of passionate people in the sector, and they love to tell their story because clearly it means a lot to them. It brings a lot of meaning and purpose and significance to their lives, but it can come out in a torrent of just different things and ideas and stories. But that comes from my perspective, not from the listener's perspective. If we want that person to connect or to act in some way, we have to be able to tell that story in ways that are meaningful to them, right, to the audience, not ways that are meaningful to us.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good point. We run storytelling workshops, and one of the things that we work on is what's your story? Because people don't fund programs, they fund people. At the end of the day, funding comes as a result of relationship and trust. So I want to know who you are, what motivates you, what are your values, how did you get started in your work, and how does that relate to what you're doing now? So we spend a reasonable amount of time delving into how do you construct your personal story in terms of your motivation, how that led you to being where you are today. And that's missed often with non-profit organisations when they're telling their stories or pitching. And it's more the pitching for funding or to other stakeholders, might be volunteers. What motivated them? Because it is deeply human, and that's what we as a listener will relate to begin with.
So when you're running these workshops, the types of folks that are coming into those workshops, is that where the interest is? Does it start with we want to be able to tell our story better, and you're almost having to uncover, well, to what end? Is it for funding? Is it primarily, I would assume, it to be able to attract more funding? But would that be the main driver? There are other drivers
primarily,
there? Of course, that would make a lot of sense. And so then you're saying, okay, it starts with you as an individual, it starts with your story, and so people can relate and engage to that, and then it broadens out into the charity itself and the work that gets done.
And then what you, together with the person that you're pitching to, can do. So bring them into the story as well. So there's this lovely cohesive narrative. It's about them, it's about the issue, and it's about us together.
I like that idea, because I think the best partnerships are where there's either an alignment of values or there's an alignment of opportunity to engage beyond just pure funding. I mean, we relate back to the Kennards Hire story. The fact that the foundation is set up in a way that can leverage some of the skills and capabilities of the organisation deepens the relationship in a far more meaningful way.
Oh, it does. I mean, we, just going back to that, we run a day's forum called Gathering for Good, which brings together all of our partners and key Kennards staff, where the partners share and learn from each other, and the staff get to know the whole portfolio. And it's just such a powerful day full of learning and networking and understanding why we do what we do as a business and as the foundation. And it's also really important for the individual partners, because they're toiling away addressing the issues they're addressing, but rarely do they get together with like-minded non-profit organisations and share what's not working, what could we potentially do together, and this gathering for good is like a marketplace of ideas, so it's very powerful.
That strikes me that the more that we can understand why funders do what they do, why the funders are providing funding in the first place, enables me as a founder, someone seeking funding, to be able to tell that story in a way that's more meaningful. So I might have a core narrative, but I'm going to shape it in a way that hopefully demonstrates alignment and fealty to what that funder is trying to achieve in the first place, rather than just singing the same song every time and wondering why you're not getting the kind of reaction or support that you're hoping for.
True.
So obviously doing a lot of different work in different aspects of the kind of for-purpose space then. What's changed in your motivation since you first stepped into the social impact space, right? So, are your motivations still the same for wanting to engage? What inspires you today that either is the same or is different from when you first started out?
Oh, look, I still find this work deeply satisfying. Everyone that I deal with in the main are great people. So you deal with intelligent problem solvers, which is endlessly fascinating.
Rewarding.
Yeah, really rewarding. I'm a curious person, so I love asking questions and then going deeper and trying to understand root causes of things in order to understand what solutions can be. So it's ever changing. One day is never the same as the other. So I also love new concepts and connecting people together, and new concepts that build on capability and imagining how they could change a system. So for instance, this generous you that I'd mentioned to you earlier can help change a system, because if we can get advisors to understand how powerful giving can be for their clients, that will change a system. The funding network changed a system because it provided space for everyday Australians to give meaningfully.
Yes.
So systems change is fascinating work, and that keeps me going.
You mentioned generous you, and we did have a conversation before we got started around different forms of structured and intentional giving. So your funding network piece was a very democratic, very kind of open source way of funding from $100 up. And obviously there are sectors of society that may be able to give in a structured and intentional way, in a more meaningful, more substantial way, let's put it that way. So proper structured philanthropy is also a skill that needs to be taught and a set of lessons that needs to be acquired. There seems to be a gap. We were talking about it. I attended a course in Singapore that was being run that was exactly that, teaching financial advisors about how to talk about structured philanthropy. What are some of the vehicles that are available to facilitate that? Why would families want to do that in the first place? How to hold those conversations? It strikes me that's a huge opportunity. Is there a gap in that knowledge here in Australia also, in the same way that I've seen in Singapore?
Yeah, there's a gap in the financial advisory field.
Okay.
Definitely.
And so generous you is the intention there is to be able to kind of build capability and knowledge in that space to help facilitate and enable that conversation.
Correct. It's really addressing a systems problem and trying to unleash more money going into the non-profit sector.
Yeah.
There's going to be trillions of dollars of intergenerational wealth transfer. And it's happening already, of course. And younger people are much more socially conscious.
Yes.
So, when that transfer of intergenerational funds occurs, it's really in the interests of advisors to understand perhaps what the motivations are of the children and the family. As I say, there's a whole lot of benefits in advisors learning more about philanthropy and how to have that, and having the confidence to be able to have that conversation. And what Generous You is going to be about, it hasn't launched yet, is empowering them to have the confidence and giving them the tools to have those conversations. And that's going to be a non-charged. So a philanthropist is underwriting this this campaign.
Okay.
So it's going to be, if you're an advisor and you want access to the tools, you can just have access to the tools.
Oh, fantastic. All right. So I agree with you around the idea of the kind of the great wealth transfer, as they call it. It's literally $3 trillion or more, isn't it, by 2050, something like that. And I can imagine that there are many financial advisory firms who would be at risk. This is not about customer acquisition, it's about customer retention. If your wealth is transferring, then the relationship is transferring to the next generation. And I've seen some statistics, an incredibly high percentage of those relationships are lost during that transfer process. They'll take the business away from the long-standing family kind of wealth advisor because it's perceived to be not for them.
Yes.
Right. So maybe in this world, actually giving financial advisors a little bit more skills and awareness for what different generation might be looking for is a way of retaining a relationship.
Absolutely.
Moving beyond being seen as kind of just pure wealth accumulation to something with greater meaning and purpose behind it.
True, and it just makes the relationship much more sticky.
It's healthy, right?
It deepens the relationship. And just as I say, it really empowers the advisor because they're not just thinking about investing capital, they're thinking about broader society as well.
Otherwise the conversation is stuck in a very single dimension, wealth accumulation, like capital architecture. Okay, that's great, but it only takes you so far in understanding the aims and ambitions of the family that sits behind that capital.
Correct, and when that conversation's opened up, it's surprising where it goes. Yeah. It's just not being opened up at the moment.
And it strikes me
in the main.
You look at the percentages, the concentration of philanthropic activity in Australia was quite a small number of family businesses that are actually donating a significant percentage of that type of structured philanthropy. So the hope must surely be that we can widen that net a little bit and invite more families into more structured and intentional giving.
That's right. Yeah.
Very good. Grow the giving pie. That's absolutely what we're about.
Absolutely.
It strikes me that it's not just about training and formal skills acquisition. There's some mentorship that's required there, both for financial advisors, but perhaps just as importantly for leaders in the for-purpose space. It strikes me, because I live and breathe it sometimes, that the work in the philanthropic sector, it's a source of great satisfaction. I'll frame it in personal terms, and then we'll talk about it more generally. It is a source of immense satisfaction for me and the work that I do with the IFS Foundation. I'm also racked with self-doubt sometimes. And we have this conversation as, among the trustees as well. Are we doing things the right way? Are we engaging communities? Are we bringing change to it? Are we really serving the need? Are we serving as useful alongside us? Are we doing no harm? There's a lot of complex issues there, and so we're thinking about our theory of change often, we're thinking about our models of intervention, and we're wanting to make sure that we're genuinely doing no harm and that what we're doing is having a meaningful long-term impact. And it creates self-doubt sometimes. That's a tension that we hold, and doesn't always sit comfortably with me or with my fellow trustees. It strikes me that there is a role for neutral mentorship in those conversations. It strikes me that there's a role for someone that's maybe been there before, has a bit of wisdom to share, can help navigate those tensions. I understand that's work that you get involved in as well from time to time. Yeah. Maybe the starting point is, where would a leader go find those types of mentors, and how might that relationship be structured in a way that is effective for leaders in the for-purpose space? There
are a number of programs, formal mentoring programs in Australia. One is Kilfinnan, Australia. Mm-hmm. So Kilfinnan is based out of Melbourne, and they match corporate chairs and CEOs with non-profit CEOs in a mentoring experience. And it's up to the mentor and mentee as to how they want to conduct that relationship, how often they get together, what their agendas are, etc., etc. And that's a year-long mentoring program. There's another one, Social Impact Hub, have a fellowship, and mentoring is part of that fellowship. And there's also mentor walks. So I was on the board of Kilfinnan, Social Impact Hub. I do a lot of mentoring with, and I'm also a mentor with Mentor Walks. And Mentor Walks is terrific in that it's held once a month on a Friday morning, early in the morning. It's for women, young professional women. Very experienced people from across a number of sectors and mentors. They are matched with mentees, 2 to 3 mentees, and they walk around botanical gardens for an hour and do walk mentoring. Yep. And this is sort of spread around the world now. But so Mentor Walks is a very effective way to get mentored as well. But I'd just say with mentoring, it's a lot of people think they'd be good mentors. and they not necessarily are.
I would imagine, especially in the for-purpose space, you mentioned earlier, right? There's not always a lot of money to go around, and I've certainly seen some skills-based volunteering things coming in where someone comes from a corporate landscape and just expects there to be a marketing budget or expects there to be a minimum viable set of resources and tools that are available, and you're like, no, you're looking at the charity, right? You're looking at the organisation. I think that could be quite a shock for some people stepping out of the corporate world in the first instance.
I think sometimes people can be quite naive about the sector. I think the sector, you need to go in with eyes wide open and listen more than you speak.
Yeah.
A great mentor is a trusted thought partner, and the sector needs that. They operate, as I mentioned before, in isolation often. They might report to a board. They can't share their concerns, or not in a position to share particular perspectives or views that they can with a mentor to test ideas, share concerns, etc. So having that trusted person that you can share those with and come up with some solutions is enormously empowering. I mean, if every non-profit CEO could have a mentor, I think their productivity would escalate significantly. But these are smart people, and to my point about going in with eyes wide open, we can, as mentors, learn a lot from mentees. Mentees know how to innovate often. They know how to adapt. They know how to co-design solutions to problems. So there's an enormous amount that a mentor can learn. And my experience over the last 20 years with mentors and mentees is often the mentor will say, oh my God, I learnt so much more than I thought. I've got so much more out of it than I think they have. And of course the mentees are going, God, if it wasn't for my mentor, I wouldn't have been able to do these things. So going in with the right mindset and being very respectful and listening more than asking questions, particularly to begin with, is absolutely critical. But when that relationship works, it's deeply satisfying, and that's why mentoring programs are so popular.
So deep sense of humility on both sides going into the relationship. Being prepared to ask questions, listening with intent before kind of lunch. Because it does strike me that's, again, in the for-profit space, we're almost driven to, we've got to find solutions. Right? The conversation is very solution-oriented. We've got to find an answer to this vexatious problem because of whatever commercial pressures we face. And yet, it's a different paradigm when we're having a conversation in the for-purpose space. Holding that space, listening with intent, and not necessarily rushing to solutions sounds like good advice for any would-be mentor out there.
Well, it is, and because the mentees operate in a very complex environment that's talent constrained, financially constrained. Resources generally constrained, but they're addressing issues that are deeply interconnected, complex, and take time to change. So it's not a product that you can grow and scale. We're talking about people. And whenever people are involved, it makes it much more complex, and that's why patient capital needs to come in, both physical resource and monetary resource, because change takes time. And I think that's the most important thing to understand, is that you're dealing with non-profits, multiple stakeholders. Non-profit organisation leaders have to be much more transparent. They've got the spotlight on them far more so than a small to medium business. They've got stakeholders expecting certain things, not just shareholders. So it's a very complex area to run. It's certainly not for the faint-hearted.
The stakeholders piece is something that cannot be underestimated. The voice of the people that you serve, or the communities in which the service takes place, or the regulatory framework that needs to be abided by. It's a far more complex set of issues. Balancing those things can be super, super hard. Again, there's a learning opportunity there for mentors in that, and hopefully, do you see as a result, actually, from some of the mentoring relationship that you might have overseen or been aware of, that is also a pathway into more engagement with the for-purpose sector? Do you find that people that are mentors to non-profit mentees end up working in that space a little bit more? They get the exposure to the ideas, and that success to significance comes to the surface a little bit more?
Sure, and they do in various ways. I mean, invariably, they might go on the board of the person's organisation, or they might do another board role, or they might volunteer over and above the mentoring, or they might start their own.
Of course, which is also fantastic if they were to do that again. It's all part of growing that giving pride. Maybe then kind of circling back, kind of final conversations. You mentioned about some people might end up on boards. You've held board positions. That's part of the experience that you carry. Are there significant differences between working on a for-profit board and a for-purpose board? And if so, how would you articulate those differences?
Oh, look, I think that the primary difference is you're dealing with human lives. You're dealing with changing behaviours. The compliance is as rigorous. The regulations and the compliance is as rigorous, there's no question. But that fundamental difference is that you are dealing with a number of partners with deeply complex issues, and it's really important that the board members invest time in understanding and learning about those, as opposed to just overseeing financial sustainability and governance. And that's the primary difference.
So you're having to take the time to understand much more about the sector in which they're operating, and that kind of real life context of the theory of change and the intervention models and so on, because that has an impact on how the board functions.
It does, and it has an impact on how discussions are held. It has an impact on the values of the particular board members and their beliefs. I mean, you don't join a foundation or a non-profit board unless there's a fit with values.
Yeah, of course.
And if there is a fit and it does work, there should be a propensity to learn.
Yes, write your strategy in pencil and your values in ink and all that, right? There's got to be that deep alignment and values, otherwise it's probably not going to work at a board level.
And the same when, you asked me the question about do people go on and join the for-purpose sector. I get a lot of people coming up to me saying, I want to transition into the sector, or I want to do something more meaningful. How do I go about it? And it's such a huge question. I mean, years and years ago, I did some work with a beautiful man called Norman Drummond, who's a leadership coach, but he's got an incredible... He started Scotland's first leadership centre on the Isle of Skye, and he's a former pastor, he's a former chaplain to the Queen of England. I mean, he's got this CV that is amazing. Anyway, his whole shtick is about who are you, why are you living and working the way you are, and what might you yet become. And they are really hard questions to answer. The first question is really hard to answer. Who are you? And I think, before anyone considers joining or transitioning into the sector, is to understand what drives them, who they are, what characteristics since childhood have made them who they are today. Because the more you deeply understand who you are, the more impact you can have as you take that into an organisation where there's a really strong fit.
Who you are beyond your professional persona.
Absolutely.
Too often I find people define themselves by their LinkedIn profile and what they tend to write on LinkedIn. And that's great. That's important. That's part of who we are. But when you say who you are underneath that, who you are really, strip away that professional, strip away the title, strip away the roles. How do you move through the world? What defines you and what really matters to you at its core? And I think once you understand that, I don't know, and you start to live according to those values, I tend to find that intentionality creates opportunity.
It does.
The more that I've worked at that myself, the more that I've just encountered people whose values I share, and who have introduced me to some really interesting other people and other conversations, and suddenly you're starting to, the opportunities materialise and they start to come forward. But you've also offered through the course of this conversation, 3 very practical ways of getting started. There's mentoring, there's things like the funding network, there's lots of different opportunities. Even the simple act of, I'm curious about what's happening in that van, I'm going to go and talk to them and ask that more. It requires some degree of intention from the individual to figure out that path forward. It served you very well over the years as well. You look incredibly happy and motivated by the work that you do. What motivates you still now? What are the things that you're focusing on at the moment? What's the kind of the next set of challenges and goals that you're looking forward to?
What motivates me, I think, is seeing people flourish, and whether that's in a mentoring experience. Whether it's as a result of doing a piece of work around evaluation, or where people actually there is a light bulb moment when they realise what they're doing perhaps hasn't worked, and now this is the way we should go. And kindness, actually. I think kindness is, and that sounds really soft, I know, but
not at all.
I think it's such a powerful virtue for anybody to have, kindness and courage. And there's just not a lot of it around, sadly, and it's, in today's environment. So when you worked with kind people who have the intention of others, it is really uplifting. It really is. I mean, it's interesting. I don't know if I'd mentioned to you, David Brooks, who's a New York Times columnist and an author, has written some terrific books on moving from sort of success to significance. And he says that, we typically have our traditions take us education, work and retirement.
Yes.
And because our populations are much older now, there are a lot less jobs when retirement is put to you when you really don't want to retire. And the system is set up for us the system traditionally has been set up for career success, not necessarily for personal understanding and purpose. And he talks about the resume eulogy and the career and the sort of meaningful eulogy. And the resume eulogy is what you offer to the marketplace. The meaningful eulogy is what people talk about at your funeral. Were you kind? Were you clever? Were you a caring person? And he talks about that before we consider doing work in service of others, we really need to understand that second piece. We need to understand what is purpose, how do we define it in our lives? How do we reinvent ourselves? And people today are reinventing them. They have to reinvent themselves. And they do, I'd say I've probably reinvented myself 3 times over my career. And some people do it 6 or 7 times. How do you do that? How do you reinvent yourself? How do you unlearn things? How do you build new networks? And that's why that draw to contributing back into society is so strong.
Yeah, by being of service to others, we're actually being of service to ourselves.
Yes, absolutely.
Our current and future selves. That's a very beautiful way of putting it. Thank you very much indeed for that, for those insights, and thank you for your time. I've really enjoyed this conversation.
Me too. Thank you.